We're back with Prof G Markets. On Tuesday, we discussed the latest acqui-hire in Silicon Valley, Google's $2.5 billion deal to license the technology of an AI company called Windsurf and also take many of their top researchers as well as their CEO. It was a highly dramatic event in the world of technology. For one, the company had just been acquired by OpenAI, though apparently that fell through. But also, it mirrored this theme that we keep seeing in AI, and that is the ever-growing overreach of big tech. From inflection to scale and now to Windsurf, big tech is paying billions to capture talent from the AI startup world, to reorganize their structures, and in many cases, shut them down, all under the guise of investment. Now, there was another piece to this story that we didn't fully unpack on Tuesday. And that is, right after the Google deal was announced, Windsurf was suddenly scooped up and acquired by a separate company called Cognition. And although the price was not disclosed, Cognition bought everything that was left of Windsurf, the product, the IP, the remaining employees, and the brand as a whole. A crazy twist in this already crazy story. And so we wanted to find out what happened here. Why was this AI company passed around from OpenAI to Google and now to Cognition? And what does all of this say about the future of AI? Well, joining us now to answer those questions is Jeff Wang, the CEO of Windsurf. Jeff Wang, thank you so much for joining me on Prof G Markets.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. It's been an insane week for you, I'm sure. And I'm sure that there is a lot that you can't say, which I also want to acknowledge. But to the best of your ability, Jeff, just give us the rundown. What happened this week?
Yeah, I would say I walked into the office Tuesday last week, so about a week ago from filming. I was told, hey, you're running the company now, and there's a lot of people that are also going to leave the company, and good luck. And on Friday, we have to tell everybody, right? So I had to kind of find the right people that were remaining to continue running the company. And then Friday comes, we have to tell 250 people the situation with the acquisition from Google. It was really tough. I mean, there was a lot of people that probably thought it was just all over. And I had to give a very achievable kind of goal, right? And a lot of people honestly didn't believe it. I had a lot of phone calls. In fact, I was on the phone 24 hours after the all hands, just trying to find options. And then afterwards, we talked to Scott Wu from Cognition as one of the options, and it seemed like a perfect fit, and we can get into that in a bit. But after that was a lot of just getting this done before Monday, because time was our enemy here. Customers were already confused. A lot of reps were panicking. Recruiters were reaching out to everybody in the company. So we can go into a little more detail, but on Monday, we announced that Cognition had acquired Windsurf, and we literally signed the paper 30 minutes before the all hands. We were just to the last minute and got the definitive agreement. And I'm pleased to say that today it is officially all done.
Yes. Yeah, let me just tell you the way that we see it, this whole, all the events that have unfolded. We kind of see it as there is this power struggle among big tech, basically to capture the best AI startups and do that without triggering antitrust enforcement. And our view is that you guys, Windsurf, you were the object of that power struggle this week. From OpenAI trying to acquire you, and then OpenAI disagreeing with Microsoft about the rights to your IP, and then Google coming in, paying $2.5 billion to essentially take a bunch of your people. And it was all this sort of Shakespearean drama between the big tech giants to capture AI, not be scrutinized by the FTC. And then it ended with this kind of rabbit out of the hat masterstroke agreement that you appear to have brokered, which has allowed Windsurf to find a real home and a real backer in Cognition. That's sort of the way we've seen this. So is there anything in there that you would disagree with, that you would maybe amend, or anything in there that you would want to comment on?
I think one way to look at it is if you look at a startup, how valuable kind of the components are, right? And if you over-index on the founders, maybe the founders are the most valuable piece of the startup. And if you look at VCs, that's certainly what they index on. Then you can imagine a lot of big tech is going to go after the founders. But I think people forget that the other components are also very valuable too. And if you have a team that is this good at what they do, and the product is actually still there, we own everything still. We own the trademark, the IP, and everything, the customer base. It's still there. It's still very valuable. And then now you've kind of taken away all the investors and the founders off the cap table. Actually, it's a very interesting like case study of like this is like now an employee-owned company. And you could even think about like, okay, if the investors or big tech over-indexes on the founders, even the remainder of the company, everybody can be very happy, right? Even if there's a smaller valuation than when the founders left. So I think there's like two ways of looking at it. One is like, yeah, big tech is getting some really good talent, but they're not getting everything there because everything that's still there is very valuable.
Yes. But it sounds like it is a war for talent that they have perhaps not executed to perfection because, as you say, there's still a ton of talent that remains that they didn't get their hands on. They got their hands on a few people, and perhaps that was an attempt to, in my view, it looks like they're trying to kind of get rid of the competition. But perhaps it didn't work out on this one. But I just want to pose another question to you. We've seen so many deals in AI that have told a very similar story to what's happened here. We had Meta investing in Scale and then taking the CEO. We had Microsoft doing the same thing with Inflection, and then the CEO of Inflection becomes the CEO of Microsoft AI. Google licensing character AI's business. This business of investing or licensing and then hiring a bunch of staff is becoming so common. I'm wondering if you think that is sort of the future of deal making in Silicon Valley. Is this something that we can learn from in terms of what acquisitions look like in tech moving forward?
I think it's possible. I mean, as CEO, my duty was to maximize the value of the shareholders. And it just so happens that everybody at the company, all the employees were the shareholders, right? So I think in some of the other cases, I don't know what their new CEO was thinking of their plan. Like maybe it is to just run a just normal business. You don't have to grow 10x because there's no VCs forcing you to. But for me, like my job is to find as many options as possible, talk to a lot of other companies that were actually interested, talk to some companies that wanted to just liquidate everything. But I think the whole like talking to Scott Wu and joining with Cognition and using Devin as part of the product, I think it was just so obvious after speaking with them. And I think that's not going to be so obvious for a lot of other companies that this happens to, right? So I think it does depend on, I guess, what is left after the founders leave, right? If this secondary outcome can be achieved.
Yeah. It almost feels like the AI startup world needs to join forces like you've done to take on big tech. That big tech is running around in a lot of ways pillaging a lot of the value and a lot of the talent that lies in so many of these AI startups. And so the only way to fight back is for the AI startups to rally together and to compete with big tech. Is that an accurate depiction of what's happening here?
It might be, but like the one barrier there is there are VCs involved in a lot of these startups and there are founders, right? And then if you join forces, the question is like, who owns what, who's making the decisions? And I think in this case, it was just a very clear-cut merger here, an acquisition. But it might not always be the case if there's kind of two very famous AI startups that have very kind of like very well-known founders joining together. I think that is an interesting kind of thing, though.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly almost pulled it off. Final question from me. Any big learnings from this insane experience you've gone through? What are you taking with you moving forward?
I think just being relentless on finding the best solution is the main learning. And sometimes that means you don't sleep for 72 hours. And that means like you work together with me and the Cognition team and my team, of course, work together in the offices all weekend, nonstop with each other and with the lawyers, and just having that drive to get to a solution and having a date. And when Scott Wu puts a date on something, that is going to happen. I will tell you that as a founder. I think the learning there is just you have to be relentless at finding the best solution, and you do everything in your power for what's right and for what's good for the employees. And I do think that this has been like a moment in history where maybe this may be the model going forward. I certainly hope not, but I do understand like the situation like before and after, and I understand like the incentives. And then the question is like, will it always work out the way it did with how it did with us, right? And it might not be the same for other companies in the future.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate that. And I will let you know, Jeff, you look well rested today. So
Thank you.
I'm glad you've gotten your sleep. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on the show.
All right, thanks for having me.
That was Jeff Wang, CEO of Windsurf. Before we go, we'd like to play a clip from my other show, First Time Founders, where I interviewed both Jeff and his co-founder, Varun Mohan, almost a year ago. And I asked them in that interview how their company, then known as Codium, could compete against big tech.
I try to think about what Harvard Business School would say 10 years from now for us as a company. And I tell people this, it's like, we fail. And what they write is, in a world in which technology was changing, Microsoft had all the distribution in the world. They had this property called GitHub. It was inevitable that they would win. And because of that, they won. They won the entire space. And all of these startups, it was a fool's errand. Why did they even try? And then in the world in which we win, they were going to write, in a world in which the technology was getting disrupted so materially, there were a set of companies, and one of which was Codium, that had such a technological advantage that there was no way a slow-moving gorilla like Microsoft could even compete. So what I think is very hard. Yeah, exactly. They will write whatever the future looks like, and the history will be written by the victor, and no one will know exactly what the pages of the book look like, right? And I think the hardest part about a startup is you do need to be irrationally optimistic to believe that you can win. Because by default, if you don't, you will definitely lose.
Well, late last week, it seemed like one of those versions of history was right. Not with Microsoft, but with Google. Google was the victor. Google was writing the history. But perhaps not. Perhaps there is another version of history. Perhaps the startups actually can win. Fingers crossed. Thank you for listening to Prof G Markets from the Vox Media Podcast Network. I'm Ed Elson. Join us tomorrow for our conversation with Monica DeBole.